I very much want to teach you how critically important it is to start to look after yourself, to start to prioritize you, to start to spend time identifying what your needs are, what your likes are, and really absorb how much that matters. I'm about to tell you this crazy story called my life, which I promise you, the shit that I've experienced is nuts. And what it has taught me is that I really put myself in some really bad situations trying to help other people, be supportive, be loving, put others first, because eventually I would be able to take care of myself and eventually I'd be able to do the things I wanted to do. But unfortunately, the only person I hurt was me. I didn't hurt anybody else that I'm aware of. I even have exes who would say that I didn't hurt them in a lasting, meaningful way. I'm not saying I've never hurt anybody's feelings. I've definitely done that. I'm a human being. But as far as having like a lasting negative effect and actually damaging another human, the only person I did that to was myself. Because as soon as we realize how important our role is in everything that we do, and we realize that we have a choice to participate or not, it frees us in a way that we can actually love ourselves and actually prioritize the need for that love. We'll do relationships another day, but like, if you aren't fully in love with you, there's no way around this as a simple fact. You will always be looking for someone else to do it, and they will never be able to, because you're the only person who can love you the way you want to be loved. It's just you. Anyone you add to that hopefully does nothing but intensify that love and help you to experience it in different ways and from another perspective as well. But it has to come from you first. Take it from me. Okay, really quick. This story obviously is going to have a lot of me in it. It's my story. But I'm not telling you this story to be like, oh, look at me, I'm so impressive. I am a really big deal. And my apartment smells of rich mahogany and leather-bound books. Not the point. The point is for context. The point is to be your Roger. Who's Roger? Okay, so up until May 6th of 1954, humans didn't think it was possible to break the 4-minute mile. Who knows how many people tried? Lots of them. Some are named, so many aren't. And after trying over and over and over and over again, they just decided, like, this is impossible. We're good with the 5-minute mile. Hell, 4.5 minutes, but 4, not a thing. And then came Roger, and Roger was like, yeah, I'm just gonna go do that then. And he broke the 4-minute mile, and he held that record for a bit, but not for terribly long, because once people knew that it was possible and that the impossible was achievable and that, holy shit, someone did it, then they knew they could. So my only goal in telling you this story about a lot of me is so that you understand the impossible is possible, right? So just, I'll be your Roger. Learn from all of my experience. There's been a lot. As I'm telling you these things, I might seem like I'm detached from the story. That is intentional, 100%. In case you didn't know this, super cool fact, very important to make a note of. Our bodies, our brains, our nervous systems don't know the difference between whether something happened 10 years ago when we go back into that moment, whether it's happening right now, or whether it's something that's happening in the future. So it hasn't even happened yet. So if I were to go back into each of these moments emotionally, every time I shared my story, I would be a mess. But I also don't want to fluff over things because it was bad. A lot of it was really bad. So know that I'm not angry and I'm not detached in a weird way. And I've processed things and I don't have all the answers. But here we are. I came into this world as the only child of a couple of humans who were sharing space but not genuine love. And by the time I arrived, they were already on their way to divorce. And by the time I was 6 months old, my father stopped being around. They didn't realize that they had a lot of healing to do before becoming parents, and that in not doing that healing, their stuff would impact me significantly. And what I don't think that we realize as children or as parents of children is that that's so real. Like, we pass things along to our kids unknowingly or knowingly. And the only thing we can do is do our best to address those things and to fix them so that our kids don't absorb them and then pass them on. So I would say try to heal your stuff before becoming a parent. My childhood was a pretty heartbreaking place to exist. I was alone more often than not, whether it was literally or emotionally. My mother and I were polar opposites, and I don't think that she truly had the capacity to unconditionally accept and nurture me and be loving towards me in a way that would have resonated with me. And when she wasn't working, we were with her friends, and then on weekends, she was so tired that she would sleep until whatever, 10 or 11 in the morning, but that meant I was stuck in my bedroom until 10 or 11 in the morning on weekends. I couldn't go out and play with my friends, and so that was incredibly isolating. And there weren't a ton of kids where we lived, so I had some friends, but even still, I spent a lot of time sort of like wandering the complex by myself and using my imagination. So it was pretty devastatingly lonely. I mean, when I look back at my childhood, that's what I feel. I feel alone. And I didn't have anybody to play with or levity and laughter in my home. Instead, I really benefited from just sort of being invisible much of the time and had to figure most things out on my own. At one point, my mother's city mindset manifested itself into a bout with a chronic fatigue illness, and so she would sleep 22, 23 hours out of the day when I was 9 years old, and this lasted like 6 or 9 months. I mean, like, I literally had to do everything by myself. And shortly after that, she met this guy who was living with another woman in a different condo. And then like 3 weeks later, he was moving into our condo. But she didn't know him or the fact that he had a really dark past and he was an alcoholic. So it was probably the end of my life as I had known it up until that point. Because then we moved far away to a town that, if you didn't live there, the only reason you knew about it was because they had this horrific tornado go through like a decade prior. But this time it was worse, because now I was subjected to just being with the alcoholic. My mother went and worked at a church, and she worked all day and night. I think that was her safe spot. But that didn't leave an opportunity for me to establish my own in our home, because our home contained the alcoholic with the dark past. So I hated being home, and I avoided it at all costs. I had a couple of friends who I spent a lot of time with. But I've always been a tomboy, and so and teenage girls, man, they're scary. Even when I was one, I was afraid of them. So I spent a lot of time with boys, and I had a lot of boy friends. And since the tone of my home was so volatile, the relationship with my mother's ex-husband and I was so volatile, from all of the times I had gotten in between the two of them when he was charging at her or yelling at her, screaming. We couldn't stand each other. And so understandably, I hated being home. I spent a lot of time with my friends, these boy friends. And so I ended up a 15-year-old mom. And I did the absolute best that I could. But when you can't even drive, it's hard to be good enough. And you know, everyone around me sort of wrote me off as this, well, now she's never going to amount to anything person, and I was this slutty idiot girl. And by the time my oldest was 2, the boyfriend took off, and actually we weren't dating even up until that point. But he ended up marrying a girl I was friends with, and I think they have like 10 kids or something at this point. And so I did my best to allow my oldest family to stay in the picture, but that came with some issues of its own. And it was messy, man. Like, going to high school as a teen mom is messy, and trying to accept the fact that you will never catch up to where you're supposed to be was very difficult. And I'm a very determined person, so it was painful. And I've been trying to catch up ever since. If I'm being honest, I don't know that I can say I ever accepted that I was supposed to have limitations. In fact, any statistic that exists for teen parents, I've broken. So I have a college degree, and I've had a couple of businesses, and I did not have more kids as a teen parent, and all of the things. So it was interesting. And so then, I don't know, as a 19-year-old with a 4-year-old who had no idea and no concept of what life could be like, because I had only experienced a very limited concept of what life was like, I married my best friend. Like, I did that. And 3 months in, he decided this wasn't for him. Not surprising. What was surprising, though, was he was like, yeah, you and your child need to move out immediately. And also, while you do that, I'm just going to stand in our kitchen and drink beers and laugh with my brother. Like, whatever. So I worked for a big box, like, chain that had things that weren't secured properly, and they fell on me and knocked me to the ground, and I had this horrible back injury. And one of my managers, who I'd become friends with, had admitted, like, listen, we had the tape, but that thing is gone. So I was dealing with that, and it took a while to recover from that back injury, and actually a fluke accident is what I think, like, slammed my SI joint back into place, so I didn't have to continue living my life with it. So that was wonderful. Workman's comp, though, horrible. Would never do that again. And so I figured out how to divorce my best friend, who was obviously no longer my best friend. And I navigated that on my own. I was actually able to, like, generate all of the court documents using a website, and it saved it in PDF, and it was great, and I got myself divorced. So then I took some time to myself, and one would think, okay, so now I'm heading on my healing journey. No. I instead attached myself to my own alcoholic, and dated someone who was completely emotionally unavailable, and incredibly damaging for a while, like a couple of years. And when dating someone who was barely dating me back wasn't enough, then I decided, well, obviously we should live together. This will improve the relationship. So my oldest and I went to live with this person, and obviously I wouldn't have lived with him if he wasn't nice to my oldest, but that's not the point. He was horrible to me, which was a horrible example to my oldest. And so we had this awful volatile experience for, I don't know, I think it was about a year, maybe not even. And the only reason it lasted that long was because during that time I experienced a miscarriage, which I have learned to accept was what needed to happen. But that was horrible. And also it was 2008, and I worked in a construction office. So construction was one of the hardest hit industries. So when I was finally laid off, I was in competition with hundreds of thousands of other applicants trying to find a new job. So, but then all of a sudden one night it escalated to the point where he tried to get physically violent with me. And so then it was very clear that it was time for us to move. I just didn't know where to move to, because again, I didn't have a job and I was terrified. And so I was trying to figure out what I was supposed to do. And I had a neighbor who had friends that were leaving the country and their townhouse. And they said I could stay there. So that's what we did. We moved into their townhome. I mean, really as like glorified squatters. Like, I look back at that and it's insane. It's crazy, but I thought, okay, well, I can just buy myself a little bit of time here to find a job, and at least it's better than showing this sort of example to my child of what a relationship looks like, and I don't have to worry about, oh my gosh, like, how long is it going to take before he actually does hurt me? And it was magical and terrifying all at the same time. I was finally in a safe place. I finally realized I needed to start to focus just on myself and my little, and I was working on my college degree at this time in criminal justice, and it just brought me so much joy that even though I was working 2 and 3 jobs at a time and raising my child, it was my me time. College was my me time. But it was also terrifying because I was in communication with the bank, who surprisingly was thrilled that I was staying there, because I guess unfortunately a lot of people whose homes were being foreclosed destroyed the homes. They would like pour concrete in the toilet and rip the copper out of the wall. I mean, it was crazy stuff where I was taking care of this property, but I still never knew which day was going to be our last day, and it was scary, and it was scary for 2 years. We ended up being there 2 years. So looking back, I'm just so grateful that it was so much time. But when I was there looking forward, I never knew. Okay, so like getting my shit together, have this degree I'm working on, have been away from the crazy men. I'm on my healing journey, right? No. No. Because then I met someone who, I mean, it seemed very serendipitous, if we believe in that. His mother and my mother had been best friends for like 20 years, and his family knew my family, and it was interesting the way that we were, like reintroduced to each other. We hadn't seen each other since we were kids. And unfortunately, he was one of those like 2-in-1 people. I don't know exactly what causes it. I think there's like a broad range of psychopathy that causes 2-in-1, and I'm not qualified to say what it is, but if you've experienced one of those people, it's like they are everything a person should be until all of a sudden they become everything a person should hopefully never be. And I didn't know about the latter that existed within this person until I was getting ready to get on a police department here, or at least start testing. But again, 2008, it went from like a couple hundred applicants to like 500-600 applicants, most of whom didn't even want to be police officers, but they were all desperate for work. And so I wasn't sure how long that was going to take, but I was committed. And but he didn't want to live in the barracks. He was in the military and he wanted to have his own housing. So I agreed to marry him. And this is why I'm doing this, by the way. I want you all to just be able to be kind to yourselves. We didn't know things when we were younger. Now, if you do that the rest of your life, different. But just hear me when I say, in life, important to pause and evaluate things for however long that takes. So yes, I agreed to marry this person, but I was still going to stay here and have my life here. It was supposed to basically be like a paper marriage. And then we found out we were expecting my little dude. And that was crazy because obviously that meant putting my career in criminal justice on hold for who knows how long. And I didn't know what else to do. That was all I ever wanted to do. So when you don't know what you want to do and you're in this weird pause, it's easy to get swept away in what everyone else's needs are and meeting those. And that's exactly what happened. I mean, to the point where my now ex got out of the military and I was his caregiver. I was even deemed his caregiver by the VA. And so I was doing that and taking care of my tiny and my not so tiny And while navigating that, actually, we lost my aunt who was like my mom. And it shifted my world's access in a permanent way. And so I tried to navigate that. And I was just sort of a shell of myself at this point, existing for everybody else, but definitely not for myself. And the person that I looked to, especially in this capacity and role, was my aunt. So I didn't know what to do for a long time. And I remember going into the baby food aisle one day, the first time in almost 12 years actually, thinking, okay, cool. Like, they have refrigerated dog food at this point, right? So I can't wait to see what they've done for babies. And they did nothing. Like, they had some organic options, but that doesn't mean anything when it's still treated with high temps, right? Like, you're still killing all of the nutrients and all the good stuff. And even if there's anything that's documented on the nutritional label, it's because either it's inaccurate or they've added those things back in. And when you add them back in, you're bringing along a bunch of heavy metals. And so the baby food aisle was an absolute hellscape. And I got really mad about it. And I was just like, okay, fine. If they haven't done better by now, I'll just do better. Again, I had no experience. Let's let's rewind a moment and look at my story. Like, what gave me the right to think I could do this? My determination. But then the reality of what that meant and going up against the giants was a little bit sobering until I watched Jobs. It had just come out, and I remember hearing that the world around us is shaped by people who are no smarter than we are. And I thought, well, shit, I'm going to take over the baby food industry. And I created the cleanest line of baby food in existence, and it was called Tiny Human Food. Now, you never would have convinced me ever that people would have needed to be, convinced is an understatement, the task of educating parents on how important it is to feed their children, especially a tiny, like the first year of life is critically important. So you never could have convinced me that they would have needed convincing that it was important to feed their kids the best, but they do. And also, along with that comes like, what do you mean it's more expensive? Well, it's more expensive because we're comparing like fast food quality baby food to all of the goodness that your child needs. I can't make it less expensive, but it's a year. Like, maybe don't buy Starbucks for a year, or less Starbucks for a year, and no offense, Starbucks, and focus more on the health of your child. I remember when my little dude was in that first year, we ate a lot of pasta because we needed to put everything we could into him and investing in him and his health. So whatever, I after 9 years of pushing really hard for that and doing cool stuff, I had partnered with Warner Brothers for my packaging, and I was on Dr. Oz and Windy City Live, and I met some really great people, and I approached some cool celebrities on potentially repping the brand. I decided I couldn't martyr myself anymore for it. I couldn't have one more conversation with a philanthropic investor who was like, yeah, but how quick are you going to make us a lot of money? And I just actually put it to the side a couple of years ago and decided that I'm happy to pick it back up down the road if the right things come together. But anyway, so going back to this marriage, my ex-husband, who I was a caregiver for, thanked me for everything I did for him by having an affair on me with a personal trainer. Like, that actually happened. And I found out a few months into us moving into the house that we bought, and it was a 4-bedroom house on half an acre. We had to gut it because it was in really bad shape. And I had like no tools of my own, nor did I know how to do a lot of the things I was going to need to do, but I also wasn't willing to spend another moment of my life with someone like that. So I chose my family first, and that no longer included him. So we got divorced. I'm now left with this house to put back together on my own. So I needed to figure out how to do that because I couldn't hire people to do it. I could barely afford just the materials to do it. And so I'm doing this, and I'm running this company at the beginning, and I'm trying to do all of these things. And around that time, I was reunited with one of the best humans on the planet. And after a few months, we started dating, and if I'm honest, I mean, he breathed life back into me after my divorce. He like loved me back to life, if that makes sense. And so after a while, my kids and I moved down to Chicago, and we were living together. It was then that I realized that after a bit that he had a drinking problem that was definitely more than I was comfortable subjecting myself or exposing my kids to. And so we had to go our separate ways. But I still have nothing but love in this world for him, and I'm so grateful he exists. And so then my oldest went and lived with my mother, and my little guy and I were in an apartment, a garden apartment by ourselves in the city, but that didn't work because I didn't have anybody there. Not that I really had anybody anywhere else, but I definitely didn't there, and you feel it more, I think, when you're surrounded by everyone and alone. So we moved back out to my house after I was able to get the horrible renter. There were 2 people living in it. One was horrible. The other one is amazing. Get them out. So moved back out to my house and spent a few years just really by myself, and focusing on me, and started dabbling in doing the public speaking I've always wanted to do, and the story sharing I've always wanted to do. And then I met the person who I thought was my person. And I remember that day like it was 5 minutes ago. I had done serious work on myself, and I remember putting this like checklist of all of the things that I wanted in a person, and I wasn't going to settle for anything less than that, and it was going to have to be at least that list, if not more. And it was like one thing after the next. He was checking off of the box. And I remember right before we met, I had told a friend I wasn't interested in meeting anybody until I met someone who loved me at least as much as I love myself. And we met very quickly after. Ended up being very telling that I had some work on loving myself to do. But he introduced me to my chosen dad, who is just one of the loves of my life. And he has a daughter who is a lot like me. And so we had this amazingly effortless, comfy relationship. So that was fun to experience that with a little girl. And I asked if they wanted to move in, and I thought that would be super fun to start our lives together. And we didn't know that the pandemic was going to create a lockdown right after, so that was intense. And actually a lot of things happened the first year that we cohabitated that would make anybody crazy. And I even went back to smoking. But there was this gnawing at me that the temper was a problem. And so finally, after dealing with it for way too long, I decided that even though it felt like the emotional equivalent of chewing off my own arm, I needed to ask him to move out. And I knew what all that meant I was losing, and what it meant for the kids. But what I hoped it would ultimately mean is that I wouldn't be participating in setting a really bad example to children of what a relationship looks like, or a healthy relationship should look like. And I knew I couldn't personally take it anymore. So after that, I decided it made sense, not to my heart, but to my brain, to put my house on the market. And I'd always planned very dramatically to have my ashes spread in the yard of that house after I died, whatever, 100 years from now. So like that tells you how much I didn't want to sell that house. So between the loss of what I thought was my family, and then the loss of my home and stability, and and then also right before this, I had finally gotten hired on a police department, and the first couple of weeks with my FTO was probably the happiest I've ever been, and he was amazing, and my sergeant was amazing, and I was so excited to call that department home. But then I got to the police academy, and this was January of 22, and saw the way that they were teaching things, and they broke my love for that job in like a week and a half. I mean, not the job itself, but my viewpoint of people who teach it, because they were teaching these babies. They were like 21, 22, at this point I'm 35 years old. They're teaching them that like everyone wants them dead and blah blah blah. And listen, I understand when you're in law enforcement you have to have your head on a swivel. I'm not delusional. I'm not saying you can go around and hug everyone. However, to immediately create that sort of fear and adversarial relationship and not teach how to diffuse a situation, it is no wonder to me that the community and the police have the relationship that they do. So I decided I didn't want to be a part of that, as much as it absolutely broke my heart. And I mean that in every way. And I think in some ways I'm still actually working through that one, because I can't accept, but I need to, that's how it is. So all of these things happened in 1 year, and that made 2022 the worst year of my life, hands down. And there was a point where I remember just like laying on my stairs, hoping my body would just stop, because I didn't want to feel that kind of pain anymore. And I didn't know how to exist with that amount of pain. So it's incredible to be able to look back and like just want to hug that me and tell her we're getting there. So I left the police academy. I left the damaging relationship. I left the home that was just going to financially ruin me to stay in, and started over, kind of. I wasn't ready to give up on law enforcement just yet, so I thought I would try community service officer, because it was going to allow me to go more along with people than against them, and whatever. It was like a horrendously boring job. So I left that and was really just focusing on my son. And so I decided to take what I had learned about what it takes to put a home together, accompanied with my previous experience in commercial general contracting, and then my love and natural ability to just design the hell out of a space. I wanted to exist in the light for a bit and address problems that had solutions. And so I did that, and I became a designer. I wasn't intending to become a GC right away, but during my first big remodel, I had to experience another 2-in-1 person. And like, I tell you what, man, I'm not sure what the mirroring thing is that I'm doing where I'm attracting these people. I am working hard to figure that out so that I don't have to do it again. But he was another, oh my God, I'm so great, I'm all the things, and appeared to be, and was generous, until he was not. And he was stealing a lot of money from my client, and I made her aware of it, but she wouldn't do anything about it, and we had separate contracts, so I couldn't do anything about it. And I was stuck just watching this horrible thing unfold. And even though she wouldn't do anything to stop it, I still worked tirelessly to make up for what he was doing. And I put myself in a horrible position in every way, emotionally, financially. The time I wasted there was insane. And not only was there no appreciation, but like, she's still mad at me to this day. And it's beyond my comprehension. I've learned that clients will just take, sometimes humans in general will just take And so when you're providing a service, you have to learn to advocate for yourself and have solid boundaries. You can think they're a great person, but if they're taking advantage, if it's harming you, boundary. And during this entire time, the last year and a half, just a little bit over, of starting this business, I've also been in a court battle with my ex. And it's appalling to me how long it takes just to ask the legal system to uphold an existing court order. But that's how it is, I guess. So I incurred a significant amount of debt in legal fees. I already had debt, but it was like I was standing on the tip of a branch. And then this court case came and the legal fees knocked me right off. They actually snapped the branch. So last fall I ended up with really no other option than to file bankruptcy. But in trying to avoid it, because wow, did that one hurt. Somebody suggested like doing a GoFundMe campaign to see if I could raise the funds to pay for my legal fees. And I remember talking to a friend of mine. We had been best friends for like 23 years, and she had seen my life unfold. And she told me I didn't make enough money to ask for help. So that was the last conversation we've ever had, actually. And then we get to the point where like the case has to go to trial, and my attorney tells me it's going to be another $5,000 to $7,000 to represent me for the trial. So I told him I would just have to do it myself. So then I represented myself through an all-day trial and have continued to represent myself, and pretty damn well, actually. So things are looking good there, but I've had to do that alongside existing with two other 2-in-1 people who have crossed my path. And I have made so many mistakes. Please stop judging yourself for yours. You get to live this life in a way that feels good to you. Why else would we be here? Because I'm sorry, you're not going to convince me that my life is meant for everyone else and for me to have a horrible experience and put other people first, so that then from the outside in the peripheral, where other people don't understand, they can look at my life and judge it harshly because, I haven't done this, and why you've done that, and why did you make that decision, and what were you thinking here? I was always thinking about everyone else. Always. That's not healthy. That's not okay. That's not going to benefit you or ultimately anyone else. So please take this opportunity to become free of whatever narrative has been put in your head telling you that you're not allowed to focus on you first, prioritize you, take care of you, look after yourself, because that is the most important thing you will ever hear, I promise. And I say that confidently, because if everyone would start to love themselves and prioritize themselves, we'd have a much healthier, happier existence with other people on this planet. Look around to everyone that you know. And I mean this sincerely. If you've got an awesome list, I want to know those people too. Because I have a hard time finding them. But like, if you've got a solid list of people and you can only count the ones that you think are living their best life on one hand or less than, or not at all, that should kind of tell you something, right? Like, just as humans, we're just not programmed to love ourselves. And then we wonder why we feel depleted and tired, and we're exhausted and unhappy and depressed and anxious and whatever, because we're always trying to live up to everybody else and everything else and all the other things. But like, us, inner being, us. And I don't even mean that like necessarily in a religious way. If it is for you, then that's for you. But for me, I just know that energetically, there's a whole lot going on in here that I couldn't begin to understand, but it exists, it is real, and it can't be destroyed. So it'll carry on, and it was here before me. So take care of that space, please. Because holy shit, like, for 20 years I have prioritized everyone else and wondered why I was so miserable. Dude. And I don't regret it because because I refuse to, and I've done a lot of work, and now I can share it with you, but take it. Just take all of the holy shit, why would she do that? And then use it to fuel your focus on yourself. Okay? What a wonderful world it will be when we're all so free from this lie of you don't matter. You matter more than anything. I hope that this has done you some good, and that you will continue to do yourself some good, and that the ripple effect of that will be more people seeing that and feeling really good around you, and then doing it too. Be kind to you, please. You are the most important thing. Have to be. So figure out how to do that. Or be miserable. But then own that, because that's your choice. All right? I love you. And until the next time, all the best things.